In our last video, we uncovered the 5 celebrities Johnny Depp said he could never forgive, names that sent shockwaves through Hollywood. But if you thought those were the people who hurt him the most, think again. Because beyond the betrayals and broken friendships, there was another, more dangerous group. Not content with simply walking away from him, these people allegedly tried to erase him professionally, financially, and publicly. Some hid behind polished PR statements, others waged their war in tabloids and courtrooms. And while the world debated his guilt or innocence, their moves were already in play, casting doubt on his reputation, stripping him of roles, and painting him as Hollywood's villain. Tonight, we continue the story. These are the 5 people who, according to reports and rumors, tried to end Johnny Depp's career. And the way he fought back will change the way you see him forever. It didn't happen overnight. For years, Johnny Depp had been one of Hollywood's most bankable stars, commanding box office billions, adored by fans across generations. But the real trouble began with a single, brutal turning point. The moment came when headlines stopped talking about his films and started dissecting his private life. A wave of allegations, lawsuits, and whisper campaigns took over the narrative. Studios that once fought to work with him suddenly went silent. Longtime collaborators distanced themselves, and somewhere in the shadows, powerful voices were making sure that silence stayed permanent. The breaking point was when Disney officially cut ties, removing him from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. For a man who had given 2 decades to that role, it wasn't just a lost paycheck, it was a public execution of his career's crown jewel. The timing wasn't coincidental. The move came when accusations were at their loudest, and when public opinion was most divided. Behind the scenes, industry insiders whispered about meetings, calls, and pressure from individuals with influence, people who allegedly had more to gain from Depp's downfall than his survival. The game had shifted. This was no longer a personal feud. It was a calculated attempt to remove him from Hollywood's inner circle. And that's where our story truly begins. Because while the headlines showed chaos, lawsuits, and public statements, very few knew about the people pulling the strings. In the next part, we reveal the first of the 5, someone whose actions would ignite the firestorm that nearly ended Johnny Depp's career. When Johnny Depp was cast as the dark wizard Gellert Grindelwald in Fantastic Beasts, fans were divided, but J.K. Rowling, the creator of the wizarding world, initially defended him. In a public statement, she praised his talent and insisted she was comfortable with his casting despite the ongoing controversy. For Depp, it felt like a rare moment of solidarity in a storm of criticism. But that support, according to some reports, didn't last. As the legal battles intensified and the media frenzy grew, whispers began to circulate inside Warner Brothers. Allegedly, high-level discussions were taking place about whether Depp's presence was becoming too much of a liability for the billion-dollar Harry Potter brand. And some of those whispers, industry insiders claimed, led straight back to Rowling's camp. Publicly, Rowling stayed quiet. She made no statement when Warner Brothers announced Depp's departure from Fantastic Beasts 3, a silence that spoke louder than any words. To fans, it looked like she had stepped back from her earlier defense. To Depp, according to those close to him, it felt like the rug had been pulled from under his feet. The most painful part? It wasn't just losing the role, it was the feeling that someone who had once defended him might have decided that protecting the brand was more important than protecting the man. While Rowling never confirmed any involvement in the decision, the timing and the sudden change in tone fueled endless speculation. For Depp, this was the beginning of a pattern. People who once stood beside him, allegedly stepping away when the heat got too intense. And Rowling, with her global influence, wasn't just another name, she was a symbol of how quickly Hollywood loyalty can vanish when money and image are on the line. If J.K. Rowling's silence felt like a quiet withdrawal of support, Amber Heard's actions were the exact opposite: loud, relentless, and devastating. The woman who had once been his wife would become, allegedly, the most influential force in dismantling his career. Their marriage had been a whirlwind of passion and chaos, but when it ended, the fallout was nuclear. Heard's accusations against Depp weren't whispered in dark corners. They were splashed across headlines, repeated on television, and dissected in endless online debates. She spoke about them in interviews, wrote about them in op-eds, and became a face for a movement that painted Depp as the villain. According to industry insiders, the effect on his career was immediate and brutal. Studios panicked. Projects were put on hold. And some of the most lucrative roles of his life, roles that were practically his, were suddenly gone. Disney dropped him from Pirates of the Caribbean. Warner Brothers asked him to step down from Fantastic Beasts. Even longtime collaborators avoided public association with his name. What made it worse, at least in Depp's eyes, was the belief that this wasn't just about personal grievances. Allegedly, Heard's narrative was carefully timed and strategically placed, ensuring maximum damage to his public image. Her words weren't confined to the courtroom. They were delivered to the world, one explosive interview at a time. For Depp, it wasn't only the loss of work or reputation, it was the betrayal of trust. This was someone he had once loved, someone he had led into the most private corners of his life. And now, she was allegedly using those same intimate details as weapons against him. If the turning point was losing Pirates of the Caribbean, then Amber Heard was the match that lit the fuse. And the firestorm she started would burn for years, consuming not just his career, but his very identity in the public eye. While the public battles with Amber Heard dominated the headlines, another fight was unfolding behind closed studio doors. At the center of it stood Kevin Tsujihara, then the powerful chairman and CEO of Warner Brothers Pictures. To most moviegoers, his name meant little. But inside Hollywood, his word could make or break a career, and for Johnny Depp, it would allegedly do just that. When the controversy around Depp began to intensify, Warner Brothers found itself in an uncomfortable position. Fantastic Beasts was one of the studio's most valuable franchises, tied not just to box office numbers but to the billion-dollar Harry Potter legacy. According to insiders, Tsujihara and other executives were under immense pressure from shareholders, from PR teams, and perhaps even from certain influential voices connected to the franchise to make the problem go away. Reportedly, Tsujihara made the final call. Depp would be asked to step down from his role as Grindelwald. There would be no public defense, no show of loyalty, just a carefully worded statement thanking him for his work and announcing a recast. The decision was presented as mutual, but few believed it. For Depp, it was a gut punch. Not only had he lost a major role, but it had been at the hands of a studio he had trusted to stand by him. In the world of Hollywood politics, Tsujihara's decision was a clear signal to the rest of the industry. Working with Johnny Depp was a risk. And perhaps the most bitter truth? This wasn't about whether Depp could deliver a performance everyone knew he could. It was about image, brand protection, and the ruthless calculus of studio survival. To Tsujihara, cutting ties was business. To Depp, it felt like betrayal with a corporate smile. If Hollywood executives could quietly remove Johnny Depp from films, the media had the power to destroy him in plain sight. And few figures embodied that power more than British journalist Dan Wootton. As an editor and columnist for The Sun, Wootton was behind some of the paper's most incendiary celebrity stories, including the infamous 2018 headline labeling Depp a wife-beater. It wasn't just a throwaway phrase. That headline became a weapon, repeated across the internet, shared on social media, and referenced in countless discussions about Depp's character. It wasn't only an article, it was a verdict, delivered before any court had ruled. And in the court of public opinion, that verdict was devastating. According to sources close to Depp, he saw the headline as a turning point in how the public perceived him. Suddenly, it wasn't about the films he made or the roles he played. It was about defending himself against a label that could stick for life. Depp's legal team fought back, launching a high-profile libel lawsuit against the Sunday. But in 2020, the court ruled in the paper's favor, stating that the description was substantially true. The damage, however, had already been done long before the verdict. The trial itself became global news, and every sordid detail splashed across the tabloids only amplified the narrative Wootton had helped cement. For Depp, this wasn't just journalism, it was personal. Allegedly, Wootton's editorial choices had poured gasoline on a fire that was already threatening to consume his career. And unlike a Hollywood producer who could be replaced, A journalist's words could live forever, archived online, resurfacing every time his name was searched. In the war to protect his reputation, Dan Wooten wasn't just another critic. He was, in Depp's eyes, a public executioner with a press badge. For nearly 2 decades, Jerry Bruckheimer and Johnny Depp were a powerhouse duo. Together, they turned Pirates of the Caribbean into one of Disney's most successful franchises, with Depp's Jack Sparrow becoming an icon of modern cinema. Offset, they were said to share a mutual respect. Bruckheimer trusted Depp's instincts, and Depp credited the producer with giving him the creative freedom to make Sparrow unforgettable. That's why what happened next cut so deeply. When the controversy surrounding Depp reached its peak, Disney executives made their move. Jack Sparrow would not return for Pirates 6. For fans, it was unthinkable. For Depp, it was a career-defining blow. And at the heart of the decision, at least from his perspective, was the absence of one voice he expected to hear: Jerry Bruckheimer's place. According to industry whispers, Bruckheimer didn't fight the decision as fiercely as Depp had hoped. Allegedly, the producer expressed his personal fondness for Depp, but acknowledged that Disney was moving in a different direction. In Hollywood speak, that was as good as a farewell. To Depp, it felt like more than just business. This was the man who had built a billion-dollar empire with him, the man who had seen firsthand his dedication to the role. And now, when the storm hit hardest, he wasn't standing in front of him as a shield, he was quietly stepping aside. Publicly, Bruckheimer remained diplomatic, telling reporters he would love to have Depp back someday. But for Depp, those words came too late. By then, the decision had been made, the role was gone, and the message was clear. Even the strongest alliances in Hollywood could crumble under pressure. In a way, this final betrayal stung the most. The others had been enemies, critics, or distant corporate figures. But Jerry Bruckheimer had been a partner, a man Depp thought would be in his corner no matter what. Instead, he learned a lesson all too common in the film industry. Loyalty has an expiration date, and when the cameras stop rolling, so do most friendships. 5 names, 5 stories, and for Johnny Depp, 5 scars that may never fully heal. Each betrayal was different, some wrapped in polite corporate statements, others shouted from headlines or whispered in backroom deals. But they all shared one thing: a willingness to treat a man's life and career as expendable when it suited their interests. Depp has often said he doesn't see himself as a victim. He sees himself as a survivor. The lawsuits, the lost roles, the public humiliation, they could have broken him. And maybe, for a time, they did. But each time the world seemed ready to close the curtain, he found a way to stand back up. In his own words, "People will say what they want. They will believe what they want. All I can do is keep going, keep creating, and keep living my truth." Whether you believe every allegation or question the motives behind them, one fact is hard to deny: Johnny Depp is still here, still acting, still playing music, still drawing crowds. And perhaps that is the sweetest revenge, not a courtroom victory, not a public apology, but the simple fact that he refused to disappear. These 5 people may have tried to end his career, but in the end, they only proved how much fight he still has left. And for Johnny Depp, the story isn't over, it's just entering its next chapter. If you've made it this far, you've seen the 5 people who allegedly tried to end Johnny Depp's career, and the resilience that kept him standing. But this story, it's far from over. Because while some fought him in boardrooms and headlines, there were others who worked quietly in the shadows. People who smiled in public, shook his hand, and then, behind closed doors, set events in motion that would change his life forever. In our next episode, we'll pull back that curtain even further to reveal the hidden alliances, the secret conversations, and the off-the-record deals that shaped Johnny Depp's fate. You won't want to miss it. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. And tell us in the comments, who do you think stood against Johnny Depp?